Today I want to talk with you for a minute about grief. I know this is an encouragement video, and I'll get there, but these last 6 months have brought just about every type of grief we might imagine. There's the grief of those who have lost someone that they love, whether to COVID or another illness, to an accident, or simply to the aging process. There's the grief of those who didn't get to mark a particular milestone in the way they anticipated. Graduations and weddings, birthdays and anniversaries, special trips and camps and events that all had to be canceled. There's the grief of those who have lost their jobs, their income, and their ability to sustain themselves and their families. There's the grief of those who are separated by distance or simply by locked doors and unable to visit with loved ones face to face. There's the grief of those who are huggers and handshakers, and simply to keep a distance is hard. There is grief. And the truth about grief is that for there to be healing, there must also be mourning. We must give outward expression to those inner feelings of sadness, loneliness, uncertainty, even guilt and regret that can all be part of grief. Some find comfort in talking with friends or family or a support group. Whoever will listen to us, let us say what we're feeling without judgment, without trying to fix it. Some find comfort writing in a journal, or drawing, or even dancing about how they're feeling. But slowly, as we journey with those feelings, rather than denying them or ignoring them, we reconcile ourselves to them, and we find the peace that God promises to us. Because God doesn't leave us alone on this journey. Just as Jesus wept at Lazarus' tomb, God knows our grief. The psalmist writes, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded them, each one, in your book." Just as God knows every hair on our head, so does God know every tear that we cry, and the story, the pain and the sorrow contained in it, and promises that there will be a day when God will wipe every tear from our eyes, a time when death will be no more, when mourning and crying will be no more, when all things will be made new. That's why Jesus can declare, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." So the word of encouragement for today is that it's okay. It's okay to be honest about your grief, your sadness, your loneliness. It's okay to name those things that disappoint you, that frustrate you. Not to dwell on them forever, but to seek God's presence in them, to seek God's help in bearing them, to look for how God is listening to you, how God is walking with you on that journey. So, a story. There was a woman at a church I served about 10 years ago who had recently lost her husband. Her grief was fresh, and one morning, after a long and restless night, she went down to the kitchen and made herself a cup of coffee. She sat down at the kitchen table. She was watching the sun as it rose up through the trees, and she saw where a branch had fallen in the night and had gotten caught in the crook in the branch of another tree to form a perfect cross that she could see so beautifully when the sun shone through it. It became a sign and symbol to her of God's presence with her that night and then that morning through her grief. It made such an impact that she took a picture of it, framed it, so that she could carry it with her to her den or her bedroom, to have it with her wherever she was, as a reminder that God was with her. God's presence was a comfort to her because God cared about her and her grief. That's my prayer for you this day, that you too will see and feel God's presence with you in these days, that you will be blessed and comforted by His care for you, that you will know God's grace and God's peace with you today and every day. Amen and amen.